How do you like?
This is a great,
It's nice,
it's
isn't
terrific. Whose idea was this? Was this yours?
Well, Oscar's mine.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we build up all these grass in the balcony.
Sir, is this in the left gear, if you don't mind?
We can anchor a show from here. We can anchor a show. We're trying to get
Mexico
to
today.
invite some local to come down.
I think that's great.
Hi, Mark.
Here's the volume.
Hi.
So you can regulate your volume.
Right here, okay? So
And right now you are hearing
This is push.
somebody, yeah.
But, how are you?
okay, I think it's right.
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
What do you need?
Hold that a minute.
Plugging you in all these little cables.
Okay, hold on one second.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes, yes.
Bring the audio down just a little bit. My audio. Okay?
You have the,
Is that any better?
I have the IFB on one ear and you with the cell phone on the other.
Okay, testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I got a feedback on that. Will I get a feedback on this?
She's just trying to put up a
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. I'm fine. How are you?
Support here for Mexico through a very tough financial crisis, handicapping it all, and what happens now for Mexico with our U.S. ambassador to Mexico, James Jones. Back to you, folks.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Neil Cavuto, coming up next. Ted.
And last but not least, you may not be a household name, but you can get a stadium named after you. All you have to do is be willing to part with $2.5 million. Syracuse, New York is building a new ballpark for its minor league Chiefs. The county is trying to raise $5 million from private sources to help finance the stadium. And if you pick up half the tab, the stadium will be named for you. Imagine Herrera Park, David Stadium, Fisherman Field, for just $2.5 million.
That'll do it for Market Wrap for Thursday, January 12th. I'm Sue Herrera.
Fisherman is the producer.
Yes, he is.
I'm Ted David. See you back here tomorrow at the sound of the closing bell.
Good night.
This portion of our program is sponsored by Fidelity Investments. Choose Fidelity for mutual funds, discount brokerage, and more.
We needed to...
O.J. Simpson have been dropped, but many shocking ones remain. What will the jury hear? Day 2 of the abuse hearing, tonight on Rivera Live.
Coming up on Money Tonight, remodeling homeowners throw thousands of dollars away to sleazy scamsters. We'll show you how you can protect yourself and how to buy the exercise equipment you need to stay in shape. That's tonight, 7:30 Eastern.
Top administration officials huddle with congressional leaders to discuss increasing U.S. aid to Mexico beyond the $9 billion already promised. Should the U.S. fund Mexico's recovery? On hand to discuss the issue, James Jones, the U.S. ambassador to Mexico.
Tonight on Charles Grodin.
America's sweetheart, Carol Burnett, will show her true colors on tonight's show, along with legendary singing group Letterman, who will share their favorite recipes.
That's tonight on Charles Grodin. Tonight, it's never politics as usual on Equal Time with Mary Madeline and exciting guests.
Aid to Mexico. This as the Mexican bolsa continues to bounce back from the week's earlier losses. On hand to discuss the economic situation south of the border, James Jones. U.S. ambassador to Mexico. And up close, does the Republican congressional agenda sock it to the states? On hand to debate both sides, Vermont Democratic Governor Howard Dean and Republican Policy Committee Chairman Senator Don Nichols. Next on Business Insiders. Buddy, can you spare a few billion more for POW? Maybe 30 billion more. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Business Insiders. I'm Neil Cavuto. A whole lot of speculation over what could be a whole lot more money from Mexico on top of the $9 billion credit line already established with our southern neighbor. President Clinton is reportedly ready to more than quadruple it, and maybe within just a few moments. Today, the president huddled with top congressional leaders to discuss 8 options for Mexico in the wake of that country's ongoing financial crisis. Just talk of that helped lift the closely watched Bolsa stock market average some 90-plus points today, with most Latin American markets stabilizing as well. What's in store for our southern friends? Here with some perspective, James Jones, our ambassador to Mexico. He's joining us out of Mexico City. Good evening, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you.
Good to be with you again, Neil.
I'm also joined by my friends and colleagues, Bill Woolman. Bill, of course, the chief economist at CNBC and Business Week, and economics columnist Kathleen Hayes. Welcome to both of you. Ambassador, I'd like to go to you. What is the administration going to do? Talk is a lot more money. How much more?
Well, I think that's going to await President Clinton's announcement from the White House. But I think it's fair to say that President Clinton, I think the bipartisan leadership of Congress, and certainly the United States government strongly supports Mexico. We're in this together. It's in both of our interests to make sure that this temporary problem in Mexico doesn't get extended. So we're going to do what's necessary.
Now, I assume this agreement includes our own Federal Reserve and an implicit understanding to buy pesos if and when necessary.
Well, I think President Clinton said it very well himself, that we're going to do what's necessary to make sure that this problem doesn't deteriorate. Beyond the package that was announced the other day, I think it would be well for the President and for the administration and Congress to announce whatever details they're going to announce.
Mr. Jones, how do the Mexican officials feel about U.S. efforts so far? We've made available about $9 billion worth of reserves. We've intervened to buy some pesos. How do they feel about what we've done to this point?
Well, I think it's very positive. They're very appreciative of what our government is doing, what the President said. There's been a lot of miscommunication since this problem began a couple of weeks ago. And as a result of those miscommunications, there's been a loss of confidence. I think the President's statement this week was very positive, was very forceful, and that has had an effect on this market and other South American markets. And this government, the Mexican government, is very, very grateful for that.
Mr. Jones, there's been a lot of talk about ending convertibility for Mexico, or at least suspending it. That's to say, forbidding Mexicans from converting pesos into dollars. Is this apt to be part of the new program?
Well, this is part of the rumors that are floating around, and there are a lot of other kinds of rumors. I haven't heard nothing that would substantiate that in any way.
Ambassador, let me ask you something. I've known you for a good many years when you were the House Budget Committee chief, also when you took over the reins of the American Stock Exchange. You're a prudent financial man, and the worry on your old bastion of Wall Street is the United States doesn't really have a way to pay for this. Are you worried?
Well, a lot of this is psychological, let me say, first of all, because the underlying economic fundamentals of Mexico's economy are still sound. It is the same fundamental soundness that existed a month ago before this particular short-term problem existed. And I think what we're looking at is a psychological run that needs to be stopped. And I think we've started seeing the turnaround of that psychological problem, the lack of confidence. And so if everything goes well, I don't think we need to worry about your question. But if we don't do something, if we don't help, then I think it's going to have consequences far beyond Mexico and other Latin American and other markets, and that's clearly not going to be in our best interest.
Is there going to be an attempt to tie the peso to the dollar as part of this program? Fix the exchange rate in some way?
I don't know the answer to that. Whether the Whether there will be a return at some point to the band or whether it'll be a float, I just don't know the answer to that.
Well, Mr. Jones, even if we're able to prop up the peso and help restore its value a bit, Mexican workers still have taken a big hit to their real wages. They're losing purchasing power. How big is the risk of increased social unrest, which is one of the things that helped unseat the peso in the first place?
Well, President Zedillo, when he first announced the austerity program, was very candid and said that this is going to be a sacrifice, and all Mexicans, workers, Mexicans in general, will be asked to sacrifice. And I think they've been realistic that to get out of this particular problem, it's going to be a very slow year. But if they do, if they stick to the program and it is achieved as planned, then beginning next year, you will start seeing real economic growth and real opportunity. As far as whether that message is believable, I haven't seen any particular polls, but I've talked to a lot of Mexicans, and I've been very impressed by Mexicans who are both in the working area as well as business leaders who are developing a spirit of nationalism and patriotism and seem to be willing to make those sacrifices in order to get Mexico back on a path toward real economic growth. It's too early to tell, but my sense so far is that as of now, at least, the risk is minimal.
You know, Ambassador, last night we had Ross Perot on the show, and Kathleen and I asked the inevitable question whether he felt tempted to say, "I told you so," regarding NAFTA. And as you know, there's a move afoot on Capitol Hill among at least two congressmen to sort of take NAFTA away. I wonder whether the backlash now is pretty severe. Are you worried?
Well, you're always worried when emotions might get into the debate. But I think you have to look at the picture, first of all, from the standpoint of the United States. NAFTA has been a big, big success. We have created, I think, over 100,000 jobs, and those lost to NAFTA are about a tenth of that. So it's been a big net gain in jobs for the United States.
But it's a lot tougher now for Mexicans to buy our products, is it not, sir, given the tumble?
There's no question about it. And from the very beginning, in any kind of a free trade regime that we've had any time in the past, there have been ebbs and flows where one side has a bit of advantage over the other side, and clearly with the change in the peso, it should make it more difficult to buy U.S. products for a while and easier to buy some Mexican products. But based upon what I've seen, it is still a win-win situation for all three countries. And so the commitment to NAFTA was strongly bipartisan. Without Speaker Gingrich and Majority Leader Dole supporting President Clinton, NAFTA could not have been possible. We all have a stake in making this work, and I think that's what we're going to have to do from now on. If you look at Mexico's current account deficit, the money that has helped to precipitate this particular problem, only 19% of that deficit comes from the North American trade, from the NAFTA trade. 77% comes from Europe and Asia. And so the NAFTA has not been the problem. Free trade has not been the problem for Mexico
Ambassador,
and for the United States.
Excuse me, sir. We understand we're going to go live to the White House now, where White House spokesman Mike McCurry will presumably spell out some of the plans you alluded to. Let's listen in.
Meeting this evening that the president has had with the bipartisan leadership of Congress, with the Secretary of the Treasury, and with the Chairman of the Federal Reserve, and also the Vice President. The participants in that meeting agreed to the text of a joint statement between the President and the bipartisan leadership of Congress, which is now being simultaneously issued here at the White House and up on Capitol Hill. The text of the statement is that we agreed that the United States has an important economic and strategic interest in a stable and prosperous Mexico. Ultimately, the solution to Mexico's economic problems must come from the people of Mexico, but we are pursuing ways to increase financial confidence and to encourage further reform in Mexico. We agreed to do what is necessary to restore financial confidence in Mexico without affecting the current budget at home. In a few short moments, I'm going to have two of the participants in that meeting give you background session. I'd also report to you that the President is at this minute on the phone with President Zedillo, and we'll probably be able to tell you more about that conversation tomorrow. I'd like to try to let the statement speak for itself this evening, and then provide you some additional people who can help answer questions.
Mike, are you talking about loan guarantees?
I'll save those questions. I think the statement, as I say, speaks for itself, and allow some of our officials who can tell you more about some of the technical aspects of this.
Outlining the administration's goal to try to help Mexico, he did not quantify how much more aid would be coming to Mexico via a credit line that is already established largely between our two countries. It is roughly a $9 billion credit line. We're going to go back to our ambassador to Mexico, James Jones, the former chairman of the American Stock Exchange, the former head of the House Budget Committee during the Reagan years, a man who knows a thing or two about making sure the numbers add up. Ambassador Jones, we didn't hear any firm numbers here, but Mr. McCurry did mention that it would have to be the kind of package that would not affect the current budget deficit. That sounds to me like it will not be excessively generous, or am I reading too much into it?
Well, I think you may be reading too much into that, and again, I appreciate your questions, but as these packages have been put together, they've been put together primarily in Washington. They are subject to change at the last minute, and it's appropriate for them to say what the package is and not for me.
Just an informational question, Mr. Ambassador. Is it not a fact that if what they're talking about is operations of the Exchange Stabilization Fund and the Federal Reserve, their operations do not appear in the federal budget? Is that correct?
I think the Stabilization Fund is not in the federal budget. You're correct.
So,
but that is, yeah.
So you can print money without it being in the budget. Okay, fine.
I don't believe the ambassador said that, but Caroline.
Well, this $40 billion figure that's been bandied about, Ambassador Jones, do the Mexicans believe that that's about what it's going to take for them to get on their feet, to increase confidence, move forward?
The Mexicans have not made any statements to me as to exactly what it is that would be needed. There is a general consensus that they have a $28 billion deficit, current account deficit. That's the only number that's been bandied about. The other numbers, which will be disclosed in Washington, have been a result of meetings in Washington and how they size up the situation.
Ambassador, we're hearing all sorts of estimates as to what is a true peso pegged to the dollar. I know Mr. Zedillo has talked about something in the vicinity of 4.5 to 4 3/4 pesos to the dollar. I believe we're at roughly 5.5 right now. But I've heard dire predictions that it could back up to 6 or 7 pesos to the dollar. Does the administration, or have you heard any figures of what is a range at which the U.S. would come in and help?
No, I have not. There's been no discussion that I've been involved in on that. As to what the true value of the peso should be, of course, that's a market determination. And right now, I think the market is distorted because of these questions of confidence and psychology. I think once those are disposed of, the peso will take a much different level.
What do you mean? To what level do you think? Just if you hazard to guess.
All right, this is only a personal opinion, and it has nothing to do with government or anything else. But I think it is not unreasonable to assume that the true value of the peso is around 4.5.
All right, we'll see what happens. Ambassador, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
You. Good to talk to you.
James Jones, the U.S. ambassador to Mexico out of Mexico City. Well, how's this falling out on the other side of Capitol Hill? Largely the Republicans who dominate that body. Joining us right now, Senator Don Nichols. He is the chairman of the Republican Policy Committee. Senator, good to see you.
Thank you.
Apparently, sir, Republicans went along with whatever package the administration and the Fed and the Treasury have come up with. Is that true?
Well, I haven't seen it, and of course it's just been put together recently, but I hope that it is true, and I hope that we can work together in a bipartisan fashion, and I also hope that we can protect the federal treasury and deficit as well. We're trying to put together a package for a significant deficit reduction. I'd hate to see that blown apart with this problem, but
well,
we
if
do
this is
think
$40 billion, it could be very expensive. I know some things are off budget and on budget, but the fact is, that's a lot of dinero.
It's a lot of dinero, but certainly it's in our interest to try and help our neighbors and friends in Mexico, but we don't want to have a blank check. We don't want to have a situation. A lot of times we've given credit guarantees in the past, and we've assumed, well, those aren't going to be expensive. maybe not cost anything because they're not going to be called upon.
Well, what's your personal limit? How much is too much for you, Senator
I don't
Nichols?
know. I haven't spent enough time on it to give you that figure, but hopefully, maybe with concurrence of the United States and some of our allies, that we can put together a package and maybe reassure a lot of the investors to stop the fleeing of the peso, so it will return, I think, some stability and some confidence and stop this continued decline, because that's not healthy for Mexico. It's also not healthy for this entire hemisphere.
Sir, how do you answer critics like Ross Perot who say Mexico is an economic basket case, companies are just going to flee down there, I told you this was going to happen? How do you respond to him?
Well, I think Ross Perot, and I think he was wrong on NAFTA, I think he was wrong on GATT, and I think probably the best way to help Mexico is through liberalization of trade, not writing checks, not undermining some of their policies. I think we also want to encourage them to, and they're starting to move this direction, we want to encourage them to move away from some of their socialistic policies that they've had. They're now talking about privatizing PMEX, they're talking about privatizing some of their other federal institutions where the government has owned major industries and resources, so that's moving in the right direction. I think we should encourage that move towards marketization, which they've been starting and working on for the last few years. We should try and accelerate it. I think that would be the best long-term solution for the Mexican people to really help them, and I think, again, help other people in this country so they can compete, so they can sell their goods abroad to help pay for some of their purchases as well.
All right, we'll see what happens. Senator, obviously you're going to stick around here. We have a couple of other issues to address with you. In case any of you just joined us, though, we have committed more money for Mexico. We don't know the exact dollar figure yet, but it is essentially like extending a credit line. You don't have to use it, but for Mexico, it's probably nice to know it's there. Well, does the GOP's economic platform put too much pressure on state purse strings? We're going to explore that issue and a lot more right after this.